Okay, so real talk for a second. Who hasn't, like, low-key freaked out when they check their bank account after a weekend out? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially these days, it feels like every single thing is getting more and more expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something, pretty much everyone struggles with at some point or another, no matter how old you are or what you do.
Totally.
Hmm.
So we knew we had to do a deep dive on this money hacks to the rescue. We've got articles from like all these financial experts, personal finance websites, even um, a super chill podcast where people were just sharing their best money saving tips, no filter.
Oh, cool.
We're talking like the Southwest Companion Pass, which sounds kind of mysterious, right?
Hmm.
And whether buying in bulk really saves you money in the long run. Plus, some ways you might actually be missing out on free money from your job.
Ooh, free money. Now we're talking. I'm definitely interested to hear more about that one.
Yeah, me too. It sounds like we've got a really good mix of those super practical tips and some like bigger picture strategies to dig into.
Right. And I think the main goal here is to help people save money without feeling like they're, giving up all the fun things in life.
Exactly. Nobody wants to live like a total hermit just to save a few bucks,
Right, right.
right? So let's kick things off with something that really caught my eye. Automating your savings.
Oh, yeah, that's a good
A
one.
bunch of the sources, like that Equity Bank article and that casual podcast we talked about, were really big on that one.
It's interesting because it's like almost a psychological thing, Automating your savings just removes the temptation to even spend that money because it's already like stashed away before you can even think about it.
Yeah, like a set it and forget it approach, but for your money.
Exactly.
And it ties into that whole pay yourself first idea, which I've heard like every financial expert ever preach. The podcast mentioned these apps, Capital and Digit, that I guess help with this whole automation thing. Have you ever heard of those?
Yeah, I have. I think they use some pretty complex algorithms to like actually analyze your spending habits, and then based on that and your savings goals, automatically move little bits of money to your savings.
So they basically do all the thinking for you. That almost sounds too good to be true.
I mean, yeah, they can be really helpful tools, especially if you're someone who has trouble being consistent with saving. But, it's really important to remember they're not magic. Like you still need to like actually understand your budget and be mindful of how you're spending your money overall.
Right. So you can't just download an app and expect all your money problems to magically disappear. You
Exactly.
still got to do the work.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. So speaking of like small but impactful changes, a lot of those articles also mention that roundup savings hack, where you round up your purchases to the nearest dollar and then the extra change goes to your savings.
Okay.
But like, does that really add up to anything significant? I mean, we're talking pennies here.
I know it seems like pretty tiny, but a bunch of studies have shown that it actually helps people save more consistently simply because it's so painless. Like you literally don't even notice that little bit of money going out of your checking account.
So it's kind of like tricking your brain into saving without feeling it like that.
Right, exactly. And plus, over time, even those tiny amounts can actually add up to something meaningful, especially if you're using it along with other saving strategies.
Okay, I'm seeing a theme here, like small, consistent actions leading to big results over time.
Yep, that's pretty much the core of it. It's all about, building those sustainable habits instead of looking for these like quick fix solutions.
Totally. All right, so let's move on to another popular hack that caught my attention, cashback apps.
Ooh, yeah, I use those.
The podcast was raving about Rakuten and Top Cashback. Are those like actually legit or is it just like a clever marketing scheme?
No, they're totally legit. But it is important to understand how they work. So basically, these apps, they have partnerships with all these different retailers, and they get a commission every time someone makes a purchase using their link, those affiliate links. And then they share a piece of that commission with you in the form of cashback.
Wait, so you're saying like I'm basically getting paid to shop, sign me up.
Well, it's not exactly paid, but you are getting a little something back. The main thing is like do your research first, before picking one. See which apps offer the best cashback rates, read some reviews from other users, and make sure their payout policies work for you.
Okay, so don't just blindly click on every cashback link you see. Do your homework first.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Now let's talk about a classic money-saving tip, buying in bulk. The podcast was all about it, but I've always wondered if it's really worth it or if it just makes you buy way more than you actually need.
Yeah, it can be a bit of a double-edged sword. Buying in bulk can definitely save you money, but honestly, it's not always the best way to go. You really have to be strategic about it.
The podcast was saying the same thing. Like, they were super into comparing unit prices to make sure you're actually getting a good deal.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes buying in bulk can actually be more expensive if you're not paying attention to the unit price.
Mm.
And you also have to consider how much you actually use. If you buy like a giant bag of flour, but you only bake once a month, chances are most of that flour is just going to go bad before you can even use it.
So it's not just about getting the biggest size possible. It's about like getting the size that's right for you and how much you actually use, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes total sense. And don't forget storage space. If you're living in a tiny apartment, buying in bulk might not be the best option.
Yeah, true. It's all about finding that balance that actually works for you.
Okay, so far we've talked about automating savings, using those cashback apps, and the pros and cons of buying in bulk. Pretty practical stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But what about when you need to like save money on a bigger purchase, something more expensive? What do you do then?
Well, one thing people often forget about is negotiation.
What you mean like negotiating for things besides cars and houses? I always thought that was just for like big ticket items.
It's actually way more common than you might think. You can negotiate for like your internet bill, your phone plan, even medical bill sometimes. The key is, be polite but persistent, do your research ahead of time so you know it's a fair price, and be prepared to walk away if they're not budging.
Wow. I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah.
So it's about knowing what you deserve and not being afraid to ask for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I like that.
The worst that can happen is they say no. But you might be surprised by how often you can get a better price just by asking.
Okay, negotiation officially going on my to-do list. So what else did that podcast recommend?
Let me think. Oh, they were big on DIY, doing stuff yourself instead of paying someone else to do it.
Oh,
Like everything from, little home repairs to actually learning new skills that could help you save money in the long run.
yeah, that whole DIY section was pretty impressive. But like, is that realistic for people who are already like super busy? Where do you even find the time?
It's all about finding the balance, right? Like maybe you just start small. Instead of calling a plumber to fix that leaky faucet, you try watching a YouTube video and seeing if you can do it yourself. You might be surprised at how much you can actually learn on your own.
Yeah, and there's like a YouTube tutorial for pretty much everything these days.
Pretty much. But it's also, important to be honest about your skills and what you're comfortable doing. Don't try to tackle something that could be dangerous or that could like cause even more damage. Sometimes it's better to just call a professional.
Right, safety first for sure. But I definitely see the appeal of DIY. Not only could you save money, but there's also like this sense of accomplishment when you learn to do things yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be really empowering.
Okay, DIY officially on my radar now.
Right.
What other like lifestyle changes did those articles and stuff recommend to help people save money?
So both that Equity Bank article and the podcast, they were really into meal planning. And not just for saving money, but also to help people eat healthier.
Ugh, meal planning. I know it's good for you, but it's so much easier to just order takeout.
Oh, I totally get it. I love takeout too. But, those costs can add up so fast. And honestly, most of the time, takeout isn't exactly the healthiest choice either.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, how do you make meal planning like less daunting? I feel like it's such a big task to take on.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming. Just start with like 1 or 2 nights a week where you cook a bigger batch, and then you've got leftovers for lunches or for quick dinners during the week. You can even freeze some portions to have later.
Okay, yeah, that actually sounds doable. Plus, there are tons of those like meal planning apps and websites that can help you create shopping lists and like find recipes and stuff, right?
Tons. So there's no excuse. And just think about all the money you'll save.
Okay, fine. Meal planning officially on my to-do list. What about housing costs? I mean, rent is just insane these days.
It's crazy. The podcast talked about a few options. They mentioned like maybe getting roommates to split costs or downsizing to a smaller place. They even talked about, maybe moving to a more affordable area.
Yeah, those are all good options, but they're pretty big life changes.
Yeah, for sure. It's not something to decide on lightly. But, if you're serious about saving money and it works for you, it might be worth at least thinking about.
Okay, so sometimes the best money moves involve some bigger decisions about your life too. But what if you're not like ready to move or get roommates right now?
Mm-hmm.
What are some smaller things you can do to save on those like daily expenses.
Well, one thing that kept coming up in all those sources was buying used instead of new.
Oh, yeah, the host of that podcast was super passionate about that. But, like, what are some good things to buy used? And what about safety and quality? I mean, you don't want to end up with a broken couch or something.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, but you can buy so much stuff used. Furniture, clothes, books, even electronics and cars, and you can get it all for a fraction of the price. The key is to do your research, like look at the items carefully before you buy them and make sure you're buying from like a trustworthy seller.
Oh, yeah, and don't forget about, like, eBay and Facebook Marketplace. You can find some amazing deals on those sites.
Oh yeah, they're gold mines for used stuff. Just make sure to read the reviews, check the seller's ratings, and ask a lot of questions before you actually buy anything.
Okay, buy used, but buy smart. Got it. Now, what about all those, like, pesky subscriptions? I feel like I'm signing up for a new one every week.
Right. The subscription trap. Both that podcast and the article on Accrue Savings, they both suggested that you should regularly audit your subscriptions. And be ruthless, like cut the ones you don't really need.
Ugh, you're so right. I'm definitely guilty of having way too many subscriptions. So what's a good way to approach this whole subscription audit thing? Where do you even start?
First, like literally make a list of every subscription you have. So streaming services, gym memberships, those meal kits, those monthly beauty boxes, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then go through each one and ask yourself, do I really use this? How often? Is it worth the money? And be honest with yourself.
So, like, no keeping that meditation app just because you think you might start meditating someday.
Right, exactly. It's about being realistic, and making sure your subscriptions actually fit your life and what's important to you right now. And honestly, if you haven't used something in a few months, you should probably just cancel it.
All right. Subscription audit's happening this week. No more excuses. Speaking of things we can cut back on, that podcast also talked about all sorts of free activities that can be just as fun, if not more fun, than those expensive outings.
Yeah, totally. They were all about finding free events in your area,
Hmm.
stuff like concerts in the park, hiking trails. They even talked about like having potluck dinners with friends instead of going out to restaurants.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
It's all about being creative and thinking outside the box a little bit.
Okay, so we've covered like a ton of really practical tips for saving money on those everyday things. But what about like the bigger financial goals, like retirement or paying off debt? The 10FI Money Hacks article mentioned some interesting strategies for those.
Yeah, for sure. They talked about like some more advanced things like maxing out your retirement accounts, using those HSAs, and even that Southwest Companion Pass that we talked about earlier. Those are all really great strategies, but they do require a bit more, financial know-how.
So maybe those are topics for a future deep dive, huh?
Definitely.
Okay, listeners, you heard it here first. Stay tuned because we're going to be diving into those more advanced money hacks in just a bit.
So welcome back. Right before the break, we were like really digging into those everyday money saving tips. But let's kind of zoom out a little and talk about how all of these little hacks actually fit into, your overall financial picture. Like, yeah, it's great to save a couple bucks here and there, but how does that translate into, like actually reaching your financial goals?
Right, that's a great point. It's super easy to get like caught up in the excitement of finding a great deal or, saving a few dollars at the grocery store. But then, like, what's it all for in the end? How do these small things actually lead to that, like, bigger sense of financial freedom?
That's where this whole concept of like building a strong financial foundation comes in. It's about making, smart decisions now that'll actually help you down the road. It's about having choices, feeling like you're in control of your money and not feeling like trapped by debt or, constantly stressing about money.
Okay, yeah, totally. But how do these little money hacks actually help with that bigger picture? It feels like a pretty big jump from, like, saving a few cents on milk to actually feeling, secure about your finances.
Think of it like building a house. Each one of those little money hacks is like a brick. On their own, they might seem, kind of small and not that important, but when you put them all together, they actually create something really strong and solid.
I love that. So it's not just about the individual hacks themselves, it's about, like, the impact they have over time.
Exactly. And one of the most important parts of building that strong financial foundation is getting out of debt. That's something Dave Ramsey really emphasizes in that article we read.
Right? His whole being debt-free is the only way to be philosophy. But I kind of got to disagree a little bit here.
Sure.
Is being completely debt-free realistic for everyone? I mean, what about good debt, like a mortgage or student loans that can actually help you like invest in your future.
You make a really good point. Not all debt is, created equal. There's definitely a difference between like taking on debt to buy something that's going to lose value over time, like a car, versus taking on debt to buy something that'll probably go up in value, like a house. But even with, those so-called good debts, it's still really important to understand the terms, the interest rates, and make sure you can actually afford the payments without it like messing up your budget.
So it's not about being 100% debt free just for the sake of it. It's more about like managing your debt strategically and making sure it's like working for you, not against you.
Yeah, exactly. Debt can be such a burden, both financially and mentally. Just imagine how much more freedom you'd have if you weren't constantly having to worry about those monthly payments. You'd have more money to, invest, save up for that dream vacation, or just enjoy life without that weight on your shoulders.
Okay, I'm starting to get the whole debt free thing, and or at least minimizing that bad debt. But for those of us who are like already in debt, where do you even begin?
So Ramsey, he recommends this thing called the 7 baby steps, which starts with building a little emergency fund to cover like unexpected expenses so you don't end up, going deeper into debt. Then you make a list of all your debts, starting with the smallest one and going up to the biggest one, regardless of the interest rates, and you focus on paying off that smallest one first. It's called the snowball method.
Oh yeah, the snowball method. I've heard of that. So you pay off the smallest debt, and then you take that money you were using for that payment and you roll it into the next smallest debt, and so on, right?
Exactly. It's all about creating that momentum. It gives you these like little wins early on, which can be really motivating, especially when you're feeling kind of overwhelmed by all the debt. And then once you've gotten rid of those smaller debts, you can tackle the bigger ones with like more firepower.
Okay, snowball method. I'm writing that down. So once you've got that debt situation under control, then you can start focusing on building wealth through investing, right? Which brings us back to like those more advanced money hacks that the 10FI Money Hacks article talked about, like maxing out those retirement accounts and HSAs.
Yeah, exactly. Those are great long-term strategies to think about, once you've got a handle on your debt and your basic budget is like solid.
All right, so let's break those down a bit. First up, retirement accounts. What's the big deal with those? I feel like retirement is so far away. Why should I even be thinking about that right now?
It's never too early to start. You've probably heard of this thing called the power of compounding, right?
Uh-huh.
That's really where the magic happens with like long-term investing, like saving for retirement.
Okay, I have heard of compounding, but to be honest, it's always sounded kind of confusing to me.
hmm
Could you break it down like in simple terms?
Sure. So imagine like a snowball rolling down a hill. It starts off small, but as it rolls, it picks up more and more snow, right? And the longer it keeps rolling, the bigger it gets. Compounding is kind of the same thing. Your initial investment is like that little snowball, and as it earns interest, that interest gets added to your original investment, and then that amount earns interest, and so on. It's like your money is making more money.
Okay, the snowball analogy is actually helping. So the earlier I start investing, the more time that snowball has to like roll and get bigger, aka make more money. I think I'm getting it.
Exactly. And there are like different types of retirement accounts out there, things like 401ks and IRAs, each with their own like rules and benefits.
So do your research and figure out which one's best for your situation, right?
Yeah, that's super important. And that 10FI Money Hacks article also talked about those HSAs or health savings accounts. They can be kind of tricky, but they're definitely worth understanding.
Yeah, I've heard of HSAs, but I'm not really sure like how they actually work or why they're even considered a money hack.
Well, they're considered a hack because they have this like triple tax advantage. So you contribute pre-tax dollars, the money grows tax-free, and you can withdraw it tax-free to pay for like qualified medical expenses.
Whoa, triple tax advantage. Okay, you definitely have my attention. But can you explain how HSAs work like in real life terms?
Sure. So HSAs are usually connected to like high deductible health insurance plans. Basically, you're putting money aside before taxes to cover like your healthcare costs throughout the year. And then any money you don't spend, it just rolls over to the next year. Unlike those other like healthcare spending accounts where you have to use it or lose it.
So it's like a special savings account just for healthcare expenses,
Yeah,
but with some pretty amazing tax benefits on top of that.
right. And here's the best part. You can actually invest that money in your HSA. Just like a retirement account. You can use it for potential long-term growth.
Wait, hold on. You can invest the money in your HSA. So you get the tax benefits, and your money can potentially grow over time. That's insane.
I know, right? It's pretty awesome. But again, it's super important to understand all the rules and who's actually eligible before you open an HSA.
Okay, HSAs are definitely going to be doing some more research on those. And last but not least, let's talk about that mysterious Southwest Companion Pass we mentioned earlier. It sounds way too good to be true.
It's definitely a pretty unique perk. Basically, if you rack up enough like qualifying points or flights on Southwest Airlines within a calendar year,
Hmm.
you can choose someone to fly with you basically for free for the rest of that year and the whole next year.
Wait, so you're telling me, like, I could potentially fly with a friend or family member for free for 2 years? That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a really good deal, especially if you're, someone who flies Southwest a lot. But there are some like fine print and restrictions you got to know about. Like, for example, you have to choose your companion when you earn the pass, and you can't switch them during those 2 years.
So choose your travel buddy wisely. Any other, like, gotchas?
Yeah, there are still some fees and taxes you got to pay, and the companion has to fly on the same flights as you. But all things considered, it's an amazing perk for people who are loyal to Southwest.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued. Listeners, will make sure to include links to all the sources we talked about in our show notes so you can check out that companion pass and see if it's, a good fit for you.
Exactly. And remember, the key is to, find those strategies that really work for you and your travel habits and, your financial goals.
Okay, so we're back, and I gotta say, my mind is officially blown. Like, I had no idea there were so many creative ways to, save money and just like be smarter with your finances.
Yeah, it's not about like depriving yourself or anything. It's more about, making those conscious choices with your money that actually align with your goals and what's important to you.
Right. And what I love is that a lot of those hacks, like meal planning and buying used stuff, they're also good for the planet, which is awesome.
Exactly. It's like being good to your wallet and being good to the environment.
Totally. So, like, out of all these amazing tips and tricks we've talked about today, if you had to pick just one for our listeners to try out this week, what would it be?
Oh, man, that's tough. They're all so good. Um, but if I had to choose, I'd probably say start with that subscription audit we talked about. It's
Hmm.
something that like almost everyone can benefit from, and it's a pretty easy place to start.
Yeah, that's a good point. You might be surprised by like how much money you're actually wasting on subscriptions you don't even use.
Totally. Even canceling just one or two can like free up some extra cash in your budget. It's a small change, but it can make a difference.
Okay, listeners, challenge accepted. Go check out your subscriptions this week and see if there are any you can cut.
And before we wrap things up, I wanted to leave you with like a little something to think about. Imagine if you could magically have like one thing paid off right now, like a credit card, student loan, car payment. What would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a good one. It really makes you think about like what's most important to you and, what financial freedom really means.
Exactly. It's a good way to like reflect on your goals and what you can do to achieve them.
Well, listeners, that's a wrap for this week's deep dive into money hacks for real life. We hope you learned some valuable stuff today and feel, a little more inspired to take control of your finances.
And remember, even those small changes over time can add up to something big.
Don't forget to check out our show notes for links to all those resources we talked about. And we'd love to hear from you. Share your favorite money saving tips or, any success stories you have on social media using the hashtag #DumpDiveMoneyHacks.
We're all in this together.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and keep those wallets happy.